The storm had been building for months, brewing in backroom whispers, headline wars, and a courtroom clash no one could ignore. Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis stood before a gaggle of reporters, cameras flashing, microphones jostling like hungry wolves. She wore her trademark confidence like armor, polished, poised, and unflinching. "This office will not be intimidated," she declared. "No matter who you are, whether you're a former president, a billionaire, or a media mogul, the law applies equally to all." The room erupted with noise. To her supporters, Fani was a crusader, the last defender of democracy in a red tide of chaos. But to her opponents, she was a figure of excess, of politically charged prosecutions wrapped in righteousness. Across the country in Washington, D.C., Pam Bondi stood watching the newsfeed in her sleek office at the Department of Justice, now renamed the Department of Constitutional Integrity under the new Trump administration. As the new United States Attorney General, Bondi was no stranger to the spotlight or to legal warfare. She had a reputation, fierce, polished, Florida tough with the bite of a pit bull. And now she had a mission. Pam clicked the remote. The screen blinked to black. She turned to her chief counsel. "It's time," she said flatly. "Fani's turned the justice system into a political sword. If she wants a fight, we'll give her one." The briefing room at the DOJ was electric that morning. On the wall hung two massive screens, one showing a digital map of ongoing prosecutions and the other tracking public sentiment in real time. Pam stood at the center like a general preparing for war. "Operation Exposure begins now," she announced. "We're going to pull back every layer of her political prosecution machine. We'll audit every email, subpoena every aide, and we'll drag this entire circus into the daylight. Let the American people see what Democrat lawfare really looks like." Her staff knew better than to ask if she was sure. Pam Bondi never launched a war she wasn't ready to win. That afternoon, Bondi signed off on a high-profile federal investigation into Fani Willis, her office's conduct, and the funding sources behind several high-visibility indictments. The media erupted. CNN called it a blatant abuse of power. Fox News called it justice striking back. Social media turned into a battlefield. Hashtags like hashtag Pam vs. Fani, hashtag Lawfare exposed, and hashtag justice reclaimed trended for days. But Pam wasn't playing for clicks. She was playing for history. The tipping point came when Bondi subpoenaed a series of communications between Willis and known Democrat operatives who were funneling consulting fees into her campaign accounts, money that mysteriously showed up just as she launched the Trump indictment. It wasn't just about the money. The emails were worse. In one, Willis allegedly wrote, "We need to time the charges close to the primary's maximum impact. Don't worry about the optics, the media's already in our corner." The nation held its breath. It was explosive. The kind of corruption accusation that could bring down not just a case, but a career. Or more. As news anchors shouted over one another and legal analysts debated ethics versus evidence, the White House press room filled with tension. President Donald J. Trump, now serving his second term after a stunning 2024 victory, stepped up to the podium. He didn't speak from a teleprompter. "We've seen lawfare weaponized against the American people," he said. "Today, justice is being unmasked. I said we drain the swamp. Well, folks, we just found a gator in Fulton County." The room erupted in chaos, reporters yelling questions, phones ringing, flashes exploding. But Trump turned and walked out, smiling like a man who knew his queen had just captured the rival bishop. And in the eye of the storm, Pam Bondi smiled too. She wasn't done. She was just getting started. The DOJ task force under Pam Bondi had a name, unofficial, but everyone used it, Project Iron Torch. Its mission was clear: illuminate the machinery behind what Bondi now called the most sophisticated abuse of prosecutorial discretion in modern history. In Atlanta, the once confident Fani Willis was under siege. Her office buzzed with nervous energy. Walls that once echoed with bold legal strategy sessions were now filled with frantic damage control. She stared at her legal advisor, Malcolm Trent, a longtime loyalist who had weathered every media storm with her. "This isn't just a federal investigation," she muttered, pacing the floor. "This is a full-scale political assault." Malcolm nodded, then lowered his voice. "They've subpoenaed everything. Emails, phone logs, even our meeting transcripts with the Brennan Group." Fani froze. The Brennan Group was a high-powered progressive political consulting firm based in Chicago. They weren't supposed to leave a paper trail. "How did Bondi get wind of Brennan?" Fani asked sharply. "She has a mole," Malcolm whispered. "Maybe even in this office." Meanwhile, in D.C., Bondi stood in the evidence analysis room surrounded by digital forensics experts. On the screen behind her, a map of encrypted communications between multiple blue state DA offices lit up like a constellation. Fulton County's data spikes stood out like fireworks. This isn't just about Fani anymore, one analyst noted. We're seeing patterns: shared consultants, coordinated media pushes, overlapping funding from the same shell packs. This smells like a coordinated operation. Bondi didn't blink. Then we expose it all. The plot thickened when a whistleblower came forward. Her name was Jasmine Carter, a former digital communications officer in the Fulton County DA's office. She sat across from federal investigators in a secure location, visibly nervous but resolute. They had a system, she said. We were instructed to delay certain filings, time media leaks, and build social media narrative kits targeting conservative defendants. Everything was about optics, not justice. The DOJ team handed her immunity in exchange for everything: emails, recordings, and even a secret app the team used to communicate off the record. They called it Hush Line. Pam Bondi now had the holy grail. The next week, she walked into a packed Senate Judiciary Committee hearing. "I've come with evidence," Bondi said, holding up a flash drive. "And it's damning. What began as a criminal prosecution has morphed into an orchestrated campaign of political destruction, one that weaponized the law for partisan gain. The American people deserve better." Senator Rick Wallace, Republican Texas, leaned forward. "Ms. Bondi, are you saying that District Attorney Willis knowingly coordinated with political operatives to target political rivals?" Pam's eyes didn't waver. "I'm not saying it. The data is." The committee voted unanimously to launch a full congressional inquiry. Public confidence in the justice system teetered. Social media was now split between two Americas, #JusticeWarriors versus #Lawfare exposed. But the knockout came days later when Bondi authorized the release of one recording from Hush Line. In it, Fani's deputy could be heard laughing during a strategy call. "If we nail Trump before Super Tuesday, we're heroes. The rest is noise." The nation gasped. News outlets across the political spectrum couldn't look away. Even CNN's Anderson Cooper admitted on air this could change everything. Fani Willis issued a shaky public statement denying the accusations, calling them fabricated, selectively edited, and deeply misleading. But the damage was done. Pam Bondi had turned the narrative on its head. For months, Trump's enemies had painted him as the villain, with Fani as the principled hero. Now, tables had flipped. Even some Democrats in Congress distanced themselves from Willis. A few moderate voices called for her resignation pending investigation. Others claimed political retaliation. But one thing was clear. Pam Bondi wasn't playing defense. She had gone on the offensive, and every step she took, the swamp got smaller. Behind closed doors in Mar-a-Lago, President Trump watched the latest headlines scroll across his phone and turned to his chief of staff. "She's good," he grinned. "Real good." Bondi had cracked the wall. Now it was about to crumble. Fani Willis stared at the courthouse steps from behind tinted windows, her nerves fraying. The protesters outside were no longer just MAGA diehards or conservative watchdogs. They were independents, disillusioned centrists, even local civil rights advocates who had once marched beside her. The signs had changed too. Justice, not agendas. No queen above the law. Fani lied, we divide. What had begun as a career-defining prosecution was fast becoming her downfall. Inside the office, morale was collapsing. Staffers whispered, some resigned. One intern had been caught shredding files after hours. The press was circling like sharks, and her legal advisor, Malcolm Trent, now had a new title, co-defendant. Bondi's investigators had uncovered a string of financial inconsistencies in Fulton County's Justice Reform Grant, a program Fani touted as her signature achievement. Turns out hundreds of thousands had been siphoned off into third-party consulting contracts that led straight to political allies. Pam Bondi stood before the national press as she dropped the hammer. "We have issued indictments against multiple members of District Attorney Willis's inner circle for conspiracy, wire fraud, and obstruction of justice. And let me be very clear, the investigation is ongoing." The press roared. Reporters scrambled. Legal analysts tried and failed to spin the news in Fani's favor. But Bondi wasn't done. In a surprise move, she appointed Special Prosecutor Diego Navarro, a respected, nonpartisan former judge from Arizona, to oversee any potential criminal charges against Willis herself. That same day, the Department of Justice published the Navarro Report, 212 pages of damning evidence that outlined what it called a targeted, ideologically motivated strategy to use criminal justice tools to influence the outcome of a federal election. The heart of the document? a blueprint allegedly authored by a DNC-adjacent think tank named Fair Equilibrium titled, "Prosecution is Prevention, Legal Countermeasures to Authoritarian Candidacies." Though written in academic language, the intent was clear: use state and local prosecutorial systems to challenge and impede right-leaning candidates on legal technicalities and media momentum. "This is beyond a scandal," Fox anchor Tucker Carlson said during a live segment. "This is the blueprint for regime control. And thanks to Pam Bondi, we're finally seeing it." In contrast, MSNBC called the Navarro report a politically motivated hit job, while CNN's panel argued the DNC memo was exploratory, not actionable. But facts were facts. And the numbers didn't lie. A Gallup poll released days later showed 62% of Americans now questioned the political neutrality of local prosecutors. Even Democrats were split, with 41% agreeing that the law should never be used to strategically target political opponents. Fani's firewall, media protection, party loyalty, donor networks, was cracking wide open. Still, she refused to resign. At a hastily arranged press conference, she stood defiant, sweat glinting under the spotlights. "I will not be bullied by extremists in suits. This is about power." Pam Bondi is executing a political vendetta under the guise of justice. But few believed her. The pressure finally hit a boiling point when her own deputy, Thomas Reeves, flipped. Facing indictment himself and potential jail time, he cut a deal and sat for a 9-hour deposition. What he revealed shocked even Bondi's team. Reeves detailed internal meetings where they discussed how to drown Trump's primary with subpoenas, how to leak selected court documents to friendly outlets, and how Fani herself allegedly coordinated the timing of legal filings with super PAC strategists. It was game over. Pam Bondi held a press briefing that night. "We now have first-hand testimony confirming the worst fears of every American who ever suspected the justice system could be hijacked for politics. This isn't just about one case or one prosecutor. This is about restoring faith in American law." The crowd applauded not because it was a rally, but because for the first time in months, someone had pulled back the curtain. In Atlanta, Fani's office was evacuated the next morning under the threat of protests. She was escorted out of the building by U.S. Marshals, not as a criminal yet, but as a public official under investigation. And yet, through the fog of political warfare, one thing was crystal clear. Pam Bondi had done the unthinkable. She had taken on the entrenched machine and won the third battle in a 5-act war. The courtroom was packed, buzzing with press, protesters, and patriots alike. Metal detectors clicked nonstop, marshals flanked every corner, and the air was electric with tension. Fani Willis, the once proud prosecutor of Fulton County, now stood as a defendant in federal court. It was an image no one could have imagined a year ago and one that no network could ignore. She was charged with misuse of public office, conspiracy to defraud the United States, and obstruction of justice, all stemming from Bondi's sprawling investigation. And sitting in the gallery, eyes locked on the judge, was the woman who brought it all down. Pam Bondi. Her presence was deliberate. She sat beside Diego Navarro, the special prosecutor, as a symbol not of vengeance, but accountability. Judge Miriam Ackers, a seasoned no-nonsense federal judge appointed during the Bush era, gavelled the room into order. "This court will not entertain theatrics," she said. "We are here to determine facts, not fan flames." But the flames had already spread across America. Outside, protesters waved flags and banners. "Justice for all. Stop weaponized prosecution. Lawfare ends today." And as the trial unfolded, it became clear Bondi's case was ironclad. Navarro's team presented dozens of communications, financial records, and first-hand testimony from staffers like Thomas Reeves and whistleblower Jasmine Carter. They painted a picture of an office deeply entangled with political goals, not legal ones. In one pivotal moment, the prosecution played an internal strategy video from a retreat hosted by the Brennan Group never meant to see daylight. "We don't need to win the case," one speaker said. "We need the headlines. Keep Trump in courtrooms, and we'll keep him off the campaign trail. That's the real victory." Gasps echoed through the courtroom. The defense objected, but the damage was irreversible. Fani's defense, led by celebrity attorney Martin Resnick, argued that she was simply doing her job, prosecuting what she believed were real crimes, even if politically sensitive. "She pursued truth," Resnick said, "and now she's being punished for it." But Navarro dismantled the argument. "Truth isn't decided in backrooms or timed for elections," he said. "Truth doesn't need PR firms or secret apps." Then came the dramatic twist. Bondi's team called Pamela Green, an ethics consultant once contracted by Willis to advise her on legal exposure. Green had resigned mid-contract and kept silent. Until now. I told her, Green testified, multiple times. I said, these actions blur lines between justice and politics. And she told me, that's how the game's played now. Bondi nodded subtly from her seat. She had suspected it. Now the court heard it. The prosecution rested its case. In the days that followed, the media turned like the tide. Even liberal commentators began conceding the obvious. This trial is no longer just about Fani Willis, said NYT legal columnist Joel Wallace. It's about the weaponization of law. And America is watching. Back at the DOJ, Bondi convened a closed-door meeting. We've opened a box we can't close, she told her advisors. But that's good, because now every state, every county, every prosecutor who thinks about doing this again, they'll remember this moment. Already, other dominoes were falling. In New York, whispers grew louder about a similar probe into the Manhattan DA's office. In Michigan and Arizona, election-related charges against Trump allies were being quietly dropped. A chill had swept through the world of politically motivated litigation. Pam Bondi didn't smile. She wasn't celebrating. This wasn't about revenge. It was about the Republic. She stepped outside into the DC air, faced the press, and said just one sentence. Justice doesn't pick sides. And neither do we. But everyone knew who had won. The country held its breath. After 3 weeks of trial, testimony, and endless commentary across every channel, the courtroom was silent as Judge Ackers prepared to deliver the verdict. No jury had been seated. This was a bench trial. The judge, seasoned and sharp, would determine Fani Willis's fate. Fani stood stiffly, her face a mask of control. But beneath it, she was unraveling. Her allies had abandoned her. Donors vanished. Former media defenders now treated her like radioactive waste. The political machine that once held her high had tossed her aside like a used chess piece, sacrificed for the sake of the larger game. Across the room, Pam Bondi sat motionless, flanked by Navarro and 2 senior DOJ officials. She had not spoken publicly in over a week, preferring silence to victory laps. But her presence alone was thunderous. Judge Ackers looked over her glasses. In the matter of the United States versus Fani T. Willis, this court finds the defendant guilty on counts 1 and 3. Count 2, obstruction of justice, is dismissed on insufficient evidence. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Reporters scrambled out to tweet, push alerts, and break the news. Fani Willis, convicted. The judge continued. This court recognizes the unprecedented nature of this case, a sitting district attorney convicted of using her office as a political weapon. Let this serve as a reminder, the law is not a tool for ambition. Outside, the nation erupted. In conservative circles, it was hailed as the dawn of a new era, a cleansing of the swamp from within. On the other side, some claimed it was a dangerous precedent. But many quietly, if not publicly, admitted the evidence was undeniable. In her post-verdict press conference, Bondi stood firm behind the podium wearing navy blue and speaking with conviction. This case was never about revenge. It was never about politics. It was about restoring the soul of our justice system, one that must be colorblind, party-blind, and blind to power. She paused, then added, and to anyone else in public office who thinks justice is their plaything, your warning just arrived. The impact was immediate. Across the country, prosecutors and attorneys general reassessed ongoing cases. The DOJ issued new guidelines prohibiting the coordination between elected legal officers and political consultants. A bipartisan bill was introduced in Congress called the Justice Integrity Act, co-sponsored by Republican Senator Rick Wallace and moderate Democrat Amy Morgan. Even the media had to pivot. The New York Times published a stunning editorial titled, "When Justice Becomes Politics, Democracy Dies." CNN's Jake Tapper hosted a special titled Lawfare or Lawless that explored how unchecked ambition had turned parts of the legal system into ideological battlegrounds. Pam Bondi's approval soared even among moderates and independents. President Trump, true to form, posted on Truth Social. Pam Bondi is a warrior for justice. She didn't just drain the swamp. She nuked it. Hashtag MAGA, hashtag Lawfare is dead. At Mar-a-Lago, Bondi met with Trump privately. No cameras. No grand gestures. He leaned back and said, "You just did something historic. Bondi replied, "I didn't do it for you. I did it for what comes after you." That moment said it all. Weeks later, Fani Willis was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison with an additional 3-year ban from holding public office. Her fall from grace was complete. But the story didn't end with her. Bondi launched a nationwide justice reform initiative training prosecutors on ethics, reinforcing boundaries between political activism and public office, and exposing corruption wherever it hid regardless of party. She spoke at Georgetown, Liberty, and even Howard University, challenging future lawyers to respect the sanctity of the law above the seduction of partisanship. America had seen the dark underbelly of legal warfare and survived it. The message was clear: weaponize justice and you'd face justice. As Pam Bondi walked out of the Department of Justice building one final time before retiring, a reporter called out, "Ms. Bondi, what's next?" She smiled. The system works when someone has the spine to fix it. With that, she disappeared into history not just as a former AG, but as the woman who brought balance back to justice.